Imagine sitting on a plane at 35,000 feet. The flight is routine. Passengers are relaxing, some watching movies, others sleeping. Then suddenly, flight attendants rush down the aisle. Passengers are ordered to raise their hands and put their heads down. The plane changes course, and within minutes, police in tactical gear are waiting on the runway. What happened on this flight shocked passengers and quickly spread across social media. Because this wasn't turbulence, this was a mid-air security scare. Today, we're breaking down the full story behind the Southwest Airlines flight that was forced to divert to Atlanta, what triggered the panic, what authorities discovered, and what this incident reveals about aviation security in the United States. Let's get into it. The incident began on March 6th when Southwest Airlines Flight 2094 took off from Nashville, Tennessee, heading toward Fort Lauderdale, Florida. On paper, it was a routine domestic flight, one of thousands that take place across the United States every single day. Passengers expected a short trip of roughly 2 hours. But mid-flight, something happened that changed everything. According to airline officials, the crew became aware of what they described as a possible security matter involving a passenger. Inside the cabin, tension quickly began to build. Witnesses later described a chaotic moment where passengers were instructed to put their heads down and raise their hands as the situation unfolded. Some travelers began recording videos, others simply froze. No one on board knew exactly what was happening, only that something serious was unfolding. And the pilot made a critical decision. Instead of continuing to Florida, the plane was diverted. Its new destination, Atlanta. At approximately 9:06 p.m., the aircraft landed safely at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world. But the situation wasn't over. As soon as the plane reached the gate area, law enforcement officers boarded the aircraft. Passengers watched as police moved through the cabin and detained a man believed to be at the center of the security scare. Videos circulating online showed the tense moment. Police officers in tactical gear approached the suspect, placed him in handcuffs, and escorted him off the plane. For passengers, the experience was terrifying. Many believed they had just been involved in a potential aviation security threat, something that instantly brings back memories of past airline acts and hijackings. Authorities then began investigating the situation immediately. And for the next several hours, the plane remained grounded while officials searched for answers. After the passenger was removed, both the Atlanta Police Department and the FBI began investigating what exactly had triggered the mid-air security alert. At first, officials treated the incident extremely seriously. Whenever there is a potential threat on a plane, even if it turns out to be nothing, authorities must assume the worst. That means interviewing passengers, inspecting luggage, checking the aircraft, and questioning the suspect. According to reports, some passengers had alerted the crew after noticing suspicious behavior. Others believed threatening messages might have been involved. But after hours of investigation, federal authorities reached a surprising conclusion. There was no credible threat. The FBI confirmed that after interviewing the passenger and reviewing the situation, investigators determined that no real danger existed and no charges would be filed. In other words, the terrifying mid-air incident turned out to be a misunderstanding. But that didn't make the experience any less stressful for the passengers on board. One of the most surprising details of the story came later. According to reports, the situation may have been triggered by something extremely unexpected. The passenger involved had apparently set a timer on his phone related to Ramadan prayer time. Other passengers noticed the timer and interpreted it as something suspicious. In the confined environment of an airplane, where security concerns are taken very seriously, even small misunderstandings can escalate quickly. Once the concern was raised to the flight crew, standard safety procedures kicked in. And that's why the plane was diverted. For aviation authorities, the rule is simple. When there is any potential threat in the air, you land the aircraft as soon as possible, even if it later turns out to be nothing. While authorities investigated the situation, passengers were forced to wait for hours. The aircraft was searched, baggage was inspected, and travelers were eventually transferred to another plane. After a long delay, the flight finally resumed its journey to Florida. Passengers ultimately arrived in Fort Lauderdale around 3:30 a.m., many hours later than expected. Southwest Airlines later
released a statement thanking the crew for their professionalism and apologizing to customers for the delay. The airline emphasized that nothing is more important than the safety of passengers and employees, and that's exactly why the diversion was necessary. To some people, diverting a plane over a misunderstanding might sound like an overreaction, but aviation security works differently. Ever since the September 11 attacks, airlines and security agencies operate under extremely strict protocols. Any sign of a possible threat, even a vague one, can trigger emergency procedures. Pilots are trained to prioritize safety above everything else. That means rerouting flights, alerting law enforcement, and sometimes evacuating aircraft, even if the threat later turns out to be harmless. Because when a plane is thousands of feet in the air, authorities cannot afford to take risks. And in most cases, these precautions are exactly what keeps passengers safe. To some people, diverting a plane over a misunderstanding might sound like an overreaction, but aviation security works differently. Ever since the September 11 attacks, airlines and security agencies operate under extremely strict protocols. Any sign of a possible threat, even a vague one, can trigger emergency procedures. Pilots are trained to prioritize safety above everything else. That means rerouting flights, alerting law enforcement, and sometimes evacuating aircraft, even if the threat later turns out to be harmless. Because when a plane is thousands of feet in the air, authorities cannot afford to take risks. And in most cases, these precautions are exactly what keeps passengers safe. Interestingly, this incident is part of a broader pattern. Over the past few years, airlines around the world have reported increasing numbers of disruptive passenger incidents. These can include arguments with crew, suspicious behavior, false threats, or misunderstandings like this one. While most incidents end without violence, they still force airlines to respond quickly. In many cases, flights must be diverted, costing airlines tens of thousands of dollars and causing major delays. But again, the priority is always safety. In the end, the Southwest flight incident ended without injuries, without danger, and without criminal charges. But for the passengers on board, it was a night they will never forget. Imagine sitting on a plane, being told to raise your hands, watching police board the aircraft, and not knowing if the situation is life-threatening. Thankfully, this time the scare turned out to be a misunderstanding, but the incident shows just how quickly routine travel can turn into a security emergency, and it highlights why aviation authorities remain extremely cautious when it comes to protecting passengers. Because when you're flying at 35,000 feet, there is simply no room for mistakes.